Hey there friends, it's Haley. Today I thought I might make a bit of a confession video. As anybody who collects books knows, the more you get, the more they stack up, and eventually you're left with a ton of books you haven't read yet. It happens to all of us. Whether we're just not in the mood for them, or it's not really our genre, or we're just trying to avoid this book. There are tons of reasons for not reading a book when you buy it, or years after you buy it. Maybe this video will give me some motivation to finally read these books. We'll see. The first book I'm going to talk about is Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. This is the first book in the Infernal Devices trilogy, and I did read the Mortal Instruments series, or at least I think I read like 4/6 of the Mortal Instruments series, but I never got around to this. I actually think my grandma's read the first two of these and I haven't, so really there's no excuse for me not to. But anyway, I think I never got around to this one because I never finished the original series and I sort of saw this as a sequel series. Obviously it's not. And you can read these series totally independent of each other as far as I'm aware. They all take place in the same world, but they're not the same story and not necessarily the same characters, I don't think. Although there may be some intersecting characters, I really don't know. I kind of got away from the Mortal Instruments because I wasn't a huge fan of the style. I loved the world, but I wasn't a huge fan of the characters and sort of where the story was going, and I sort of just dropped off. At some point it felt like I was reading them just because it was the Mortal Instruments series and not because it was something I enjoyed. Eventually I really want to get back to the Mortal Instruments series, and when I do, I might do this first, actually. I'm a little bit more interested in this series for its similarity to some of the ideas I've had for my own writing, and some of its characters sound really interesting, so I might find myself reading this series before I go back to the Mortal Instruments, but who knows. It'll probably just be whatever I'm in the mood for. The problem with the Mortal Instruments series for me is that I'll probably have to reread all of them to get back into it, whereas with this one I can start fresh, I can start with a new series, and feel like I'm not really missing anything because I haven't reread the first series. I have to be honest, I don't really read synopses a lot of the time. If it's a book that's been recommended to me, or a book whose cover draws me in, or whose author I really like, I'll just pick it up and read it. I tend not to read a lot of criticism or review on a book until I've gotten an opinion of it of my own, so if it seems like I'm not giving you a lot to go on as far as a synopsis of the book and you have no idea what's going on, I'm really sorry about that. I promise I'll try to give you some synopses when I'm really interested in it. If I'm trying to sell you on something, I will give you a reason to get excited about it, or at least I'm going to try. The next book I've been putting off forever is Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. Now this one seems criminal to put off, I understand. Leigh Bardugo is an incredible writer, she's really interesting, and this series, her world really, is a really beautiful place to explore and to read in. It is something really special. This is the second book in Leigh Bardugo's Grishaverse trilogy. I read Shadow and Bone a few years ago, I don't quite remember when, and I remember really loving the Tsarist Russia backdrop. I really love Russian history, I think it's fascinating, and Bardugo's writing really encases what's enchanting and magical and a little bit confusing and a little bit off-putting about Russian culture and history that's so beautiful and rich and fascinating. I think I've already said the word fascinating a few too many times. Bear with me. I remember really liking the world and maybe not liking the characters very much, which was a total turnaround. I skipped around and read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, and I loved everything about those books. If you think those books have too much hype, you're wrong. They don't have enough hype. They're incredible. They're so good, go read them. They're long and they're bricks of books, but they're so good. And the characters, the world, the plot, everything in those is great. I am just a sucker for a heist story. I love that. But seriously, they're incredible. This series I wasn't as sold on. I just wasn't really attached to the characters all that much, and I think it took me a long time to actually buy the second book so I could read it, and by the time I had forgotten most of what happened in Shadow and Bone. So when and if I ever get back to this book, well, I promise it's a when, not an if. When I get back to this book, I'm probably going to have to go back and reread Shadow and Bone first. The third book I have been putting off forever is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. How is that pronunciation? I feel like it wasn't great. But I did take 3 years of French, so I should be able to do that, even if I can't. Les Miserables, Les Miserables, Les Miserables, Les Mis. I fell in love with Les Mis when the movie version came out in 2012. I had never heard of the story before in my life, didn't know it was by Victor Hugo, didn't know anything about it, but I watched the movie, cried my eyes out, and fell in love. It's one of my favorite musicals now, probably one of my favorite stories of all time. It was the thing that got me interested in French Revolution history and in French history in general, and it's just got a really special place in my heart. That being said, Victor Hugo's style of incredible detail and long descriptions and putting pieces together very slowly can drag a little bit for a lot of people, and I know with a book that is this many pages, almost 1,000 pages, I think, it's just a lot to get through. This is one of those ones that I haven't read because I think I'm just intimidated by it, you know? And it's one of those books that I think I'm going to have sort of in the background for a while. I might just have to take it in doses, a chapter at a time, while I'm reading other things. So I might have this read by the time I'm 40, I don't know. Also, if you guys haven't heard, PBS is doing an adaptation of Les Mis 2, and it looks really good. I think from what I've seen that it's following more of the book than the musical. There's certainly no music in it, and I think they're paying a lot more attention to the characters than the movie did, so I'm excited to see this new interpretation and how it turns out. The fourth book I've been putting off forever is Star Wars from a Certain Point of View. This is a collaboration of 40 authors who came together to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Star Wars, of which I am a huge fan. For better or for worse, till death do us part. There is no reason I haven't read this, it's just laziness and maybe a little bit more intimidation. It's 40 short stories, and I'm not a huge short story person. Plus, it feels a little bit like fan fiction, even if it's like the most professional, wonderful type of fan fiction ever, and I think I was just a little bit put off by that. But there are some great authors in here, most of whom I have not read, but I have been told they are great, and I am very gullible. Some of the authors in here include Renee Ahdieh, Meg Cabot, Christy Golden, Saba Tahir, and most exciting for me, Griffin McElroy. I'm a huge fan of the McElroys, so that's very exciting for me. I'm really excited to see what he has to say about Star Wars. I'm not really a big fan of book adaptations, of like media tie-in book adaptations, of like video games and movies. That's always come off as a little bit cheesy to me. It feels like there are some things that belong in a certain medium. But I did have my mind changed a little bit about that this summer. I read Christy Golden's Before the Storm, which is a novelization of the lore for the Battle of Azeroth expansion of World of Warcraft that came out this summer. And that's probably the nerdiest thing I've said on this channel yet, but we're just getting started. I am an avid World of Warcraft player. I read that to catch up with the lore a little bit on what was going on, and I absolutely fell in love, and I feel like I've got to give other novelizations a try now, because that one was really good, and it enriched my experience playing the game. So if reading this can enrich my Star Wars experience anymore, that is great. I am all for it, sign me up. Which means I need to just get around to reading this book. This might be another one that I take in doses, reading a story or so here and there for a while. This may be another one that I finish when I'm 40, we'll see. The last book I've been putting off that I'm going to talk about feels a little bit like blasphemy to admit, but it is The Dark Prophecy by Rick Riordan. I am such a huge Rick Riordan fan. I love him so much. His writing has meant the world to me. I've loved every single thing I've ever read of his, and I don't have a good reason as to why I haven't read The Dark Prophecy yet. I really think I was more interested in the Magnus Chase series than in the Trials of Apollo series. I had to even check what the title of the series was. And so the first Magnus Chase came out and I was so psyched, and it felt like I was just waiting for more Magnus Chase, and then The Hidden Oracle came out instead, and I was like, okay. And it was good, but it wasn't as good as Magnus Chase in my opinion, so then I felt like I was just waiting for more Magnus Chase. So when I actually got that, then I read the second and third ones and kind of just put Apollo in the back burner. Now that the third one's out, I'll probably try to wait and get that and then read them both back to back so that I'll be more up to date on the story. I'll have more of a better idea of what's going on. But this is one that I feel really bad for not having gotten around to, even if it has only been out for a year or so. It just feels real wrong that I haven't read it yet. But I'll get around to it, I promise. So what are some books that you have been putting off, and why have you been putting them off? Can I help you in any way getting back to those books, or is it a personal journey? I would be glad to talk to anybody else who suffers from the same sort of reading procrastination that I do. And I would love to talk about what you're reading and what you're not reading because you're putting it off. Let me know in the description down below at least one book that you've been putting off that you really want to read. Thank you so much for watching. Give this video a like if you liked it or if you're interested in my channel, and go ahead and subscribe if you want to see what's coming up next. I should have a video out about next week. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon in my next video. Bye!